Hello and welcome to episode 20 of St Almon's All Good Things podcast, where, as you'll know by now, we have a bit of a witter. It's always interesting for us. Hopefully sometimes it is for you too. We would love it if you heard some things and help with some questions, either to email in to comments on the YouTube if you're very technical, or just to come and pester us on a Sunday and say, what about this then? That's what we're hoping to get out of this. More good questions about all sorts of things. Now, this afternoon we wanted to sit down and talk a little bit about what James has been doing in assemblies.
Indeed, yeah.
What have you been doing in assemblies?
So, we've been doing, or about to start actually, as of next week, we're going to be looking at the book of Genesis, specifically at the bit of Genesis chapter 1 to chapter 11.
Fantastic.
And for those like me who are new or whatever, what assemblies, what do you do, where, practicalities?
So we do assemblies across 3 different schools at the moment. So I go into William Gilbert, we go into Meadows, occasionally once a month with them, and with Little Eaton Primary as well. We're always doing the same topics across all of them, obviously saved on time and workload and that kind of thing. Why specifically am I doing them, or how am I doing them, sorry?
Just a little bit of what does it look like?
What does it look like? So normally we are given roughly about 15 to 20 minute slot, where the idea is provide for the children a holistic view of what the core fundamental aspects of what the Bible is, what it means to be a Christian, like who Jesus is, why does he need to die, what are the consequences of living in sin that the Bible show for us, that kind of thing, with the assumption that the children have no understanding or very little understanding of the Bible. But by the end of the 4 years, so I have a 4-year sort of spreadsheet that goes through a variety of different books that I run through, with the goal of equipping these children so at the end of the 4 years, they should be able to confidently go, I at least know these fundamental aspects about what the Bible is, what being a Christian means, and why it's so important to be thinking about this even at a young age.
So like lots of people, they might rock up at church as a 45-year-old and think, do you know what, some of this I've sort of got in the right place, even from when I was...
I think that would be not my ideal. My ideal would obviously that they come to faith much earlier. Course, yeah. But I think one of the joys of being a children's worker and a youth worker is the fact that I don't actually feel the need to have to be there whenever that change does happen, because I'm going into it with the understanding that I'm a part of these children's lives for a very short amount of time. 15 to 20 minute adds up over the course of a year. Maybe I spent a total of, I don't know, like 100 hours maybe total with them over the course of 4 years, 5 years, however long they're there for, right? So it feels very important to me to take that level of, I guess, patience with the, I'm not going to necessarily see any conversions. If I do, it might happen way off in the future.
But sowing the seed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let me give a little shout out as well to Open a Book, who've been faithfully going into William Gilbert and maybe the schools for years, putting on all manner of costumes and saying, here's a little slice of the Bible.
Yeah.
And yet all we want you to know is that there is a God who's made everything. He is good. And he's got a rescue plan.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be a huge amount of kind of theology textbook, but a little bit of there's a God and he's good. It goes a long way.
And so you've got, I guess, roughly speaking, what do you think is in terms of the kids there coming from Christian homes, having some sort of a faith themselves, versus those that are none at all, versus those that are coming, I guess, from other religions? What does that?
Oh, interesting. So you're saying like how the different children's backgrounds affect how they hear it?
Or who, just to give us a little bit of a picture before we dive into what you're doing, who are you talking to in terms of...
So William Gilbert is a Christian school. Having said that, I don't know how many of the children or parents would consider themselves Christians. I don't know. I would hope a good number of them, or they at least have a baseline understanding. But being a part of a Christian school, they have worship on top of their assemblies. I mean, they also count my assemblies as being worship, which is quite interesting in and of itself. But so I'm assuming that they have more of a baseline understanding of what Christianity is. Little Eaton and Meadows, I'm going into schools where there is a variety of different religious backgrounds, variety of different, even like class backgrounds in some cases. So obviously William Gilbert's quite a good school, so a lot of the good kids tend to get into it. And I think by proxy, not that there are bad kids in the sense of a child who is poorer or has less well-off parents is in any way lesser in terms of an academic achievement, but that they are more likely to come from a variety of backgrounds the lower down that chain you go. So we've got children in, for example, with Little Eaton, we've got children who have parents who are Muslim or Jehovah's Witnesses. And, you know, when schools are preparing their syllabuses, the only subject, there's two subjects they don't have to teach. One of them is sex education. They don't have to do that. Like you can take your child out of that lesson. And the other is religious education. So any child, any parent has that right to pull their child out of one of those lessons. Now, I've been greatly blessed with the fact that actually when I started, think about 2 children at Little Eaton Primary didn't come into assemblies. They now do come into assemblies, much to, I think, sometimes the other parents' chagrin that they don't always want it there. But so when you're coming into that environment, you're coming in with a lot of parents, they're not angry necessarily, but I think some of them do hold a bitterment that we are even doing something in an assembly in the first place, or that they would prefer, I think, for there to be a wider swathe of religious education being shown actively.
Or I guess then a degree of skepticism or wariness of, I think to some extent, anyone who's coming in and teaching their kids, especially from who's this church that they don't know, not necessarily connected with.
One of the things I find so interesting is, so I get to go and do lessons from time to time, and when I get to do lessons, it's normally with the year 3s to year 5s, some of the kids will come in with like little gotcha phrases, where they think, where they're like, my daddy says Christians are stupid because X, Y, Z. And the second that they say that, it opens up such an interesting conversation, because if you ask a child why they think that, or what their like reason is for holding that opinion, or why they feel the need to like put down somebody because of their faith, you very quickly come to a sort of natural conclusion if they just, it's just a lack of like understanding of other people's viewpoints kind of thing. If their background is their parents go, oh, Christianity's really stupid, they'll go in with that like, oh, I don't need to listen to this then. But the second you challenge it, they go, oh, hang on a minute. If maybe there is something more to this, I should at least like have a level of understanding of it, even if it's maybe what I've been told isn't the only thing that I need to listen to, kind of thing. But that's kind of the environment you're walking into. It's a strange battlefield almost of reaching people.
Makes it really important then that whenever any of us visit schools or whatever, we're with people who are really open to questions and to skepticism, and saying, I'm really glad that you're thinking about this and testing it and pushing, because obviously we believe that the more kind of kicking the tires and testing things you do, the better your theology you'll get, because that's how you get towards good answers, is by asking good questions. So all for that. And what a privilege for us to go into a school, even if a couple of kids are kind of really trying to push the boundary and kick the tires a bit. Awesome place for us to get to go in and say, let's do that. Let's see where we get to.
I think it's an awesome opportunity to apply. I think it's the passage from Romans, I can't remember the specific bit, but about always having a reason for the faith that you hold, kind of thing. Be ready to defend it. You will never be more tested, I think, in terms of like the amount of questions that you'll get, in terms of I think adults have a habit of they'll keep quiet about certain things, or they won't be as vitriolic towards you. Because out of respect, or out of like they don't want to cause a scene or whatever. A child doesn't care. They will happily tell you that you're unfiltered, that you are an idiot, and here's why. And it's wonderful. I love it. It's such a fun opportunity to talk about.
Lovely Caris, who used to do some youth work here at St Altman's and then went off to work in Poynton, telling once that she had a child come up to her, kind of tug at her hand and look at her kind of bright dungarees and say, "Are you wearing those?" not sure what you mean. Yeah, children will say everything, and it is good fun. Right, which bits of Genesis? Are you going to start on page 1 and wrap through to the end? Get some bits out.
So the way that I do it, at least, when I originally arrived here, I was handed a sort of rough template. James had sort of ran me through why he chose what he chose, but now I pick up this sort of format that James gave me of this 4-year plan, and I've unpacked it and added to it and developed it myself. Obviously, I was only given titles. I wasn't given specific passages. But the goal when I'm picking what passages I'm doing is obviously to give them that holistic view of an understanding of the Bible, right? So why Genesis 1 to 11? I think it's important for a child to understand what a Christian believes about creation, because it establishes God's power. It establishes the difference between their understanding of what their capabilities are and the impossibility of God in terms of our understanding, right?
It's one thing we keep learning through like every age as Christians is God is really different to us.
Yeah.
Really, really different. And that, right in Genesis 1, it's that category difference, is this creator and there's everything else.
Absolutely.
It's so helpful.
And then what I really wanted to focus on this term more than anything, so for context, we've been doing the book of James. Now, I've spoken to quite a few youth workers who don't think you should teach the book of James to primary school children. I love having that conversation with them because I think it is a very important conversation to have.
So especially focused on how Christians should live Christian life.
Spot on, yeah.
Okay, so I get that.
So, yeah, I think people are worried that you can't talk about it within a school because a school doesn't ever want you to force your belief onto somebody else.
Well, also, if it's about behaviour, you're trying then to disciple someone who doesn't necessarily believe, and that is maybe cart before the horse. But also, it raises some interesting questions like, okay, if you're not a Christian, how do you expect those people to behave and why? So you can get down some fun.
But part of the reason for doing that in the first place was I had one of the head teachers came up to me and he said, look, we're loving going through some of these Bible stories. It's really interesting. But actually what we'd really like to do is we'd like for you to show more examples of actual Christians, like whatever, celebrities or something that are Christians as well, and talk about what it's like to live as a Christian. And so I spent, the term prior to that developing that. And so getting to do James for a term was my opportunity to then go, okay, one of the walls that a lot of these kids were running into was they kind of go, why would I ever want to be a Christian? It's really hard for X, Y, Z reasons. And then going, okay, let's go through James point by point. Let's talk about what some of the challenges are about being Christian. What are some of the things that you're working through, and why it's not necessarily this big yoke that you're picking up to become a Christian. That actually it's a joyful thing to express the changes that God's making in your heart and into your life, and how those things they're not reasons for people to ridicule kind of thing, or to go like, oh, it's not for me because it's too difficult, I'm not perfect. But actually to go, no, you're not perfect. That's part of the joy, is being transformed by God's Spirit in you.
Walk in the light, my yoke is easy, my burden is light.
Absolutely. So then why Genesis from there? Well, because for them to make that next step, they need to have, bearing in mind this is the end of the 4-year cycle now, so they've had 3 years of build-up for some of the kids that started there. I really wanted to cement the importance of why being a Christian is needed. So what is sin? Why is it important that we recognize the consequences of it? And then where did it come from? That kind of thing. So doing Genesis 1 to 11 starts off with that brilliance of, okay, look how amazing God is. He's created the universe. Obviously, kind of wanting the kids to fight and argue with me as well, because it's a great opportunity to talk about that. But also to then compare it to Adam and Eve in their desire to be like God, and then the root of sin and how it spreads across, and the consequences of that, I think, are just so interesting to look at. So we go, for those of you who don't have Genesis 1 to 11 open in front of you, and that runs us from, obviously, creation, Adam and Eve, we get a little bit about Cain and Abel, a little bit about Enoch, and then we have Noah. And we stop just before Abraham, with the goal of, in the term after, I think it's the term after, no, it's in spring, summer. So after Easter, we'll come back to 12 to 50 and finish off that Abrahamic viewpoint after we've got that part. But if that answers it, I don't know.
Nice. Can I pull us back to something I think you said, or that Ethan had said, which was about Christian celebrities. Has anyone got a favourite or someone I can think of as a Christian in the media spotlight?
Letitia, I think it's Letitia Wright, the girl, the new Black Panther.
Oh, cool.
She's a Christian. Obviously, Chris Pratt's fairly famous as well.
Fairly famous. He's doing all right.
Yeah, he's doing all right. Who else was it? I can't remember if it was like Denzel Washington. I think it's Denzel Washington. It's another like very big, famous tenured actor.
He don't get a lot bigger than Denzel Washington.
No, I think that's correct. Obviously, there's other ones like Anna Faris and stuff like that, but then she was married to Chris Pratt and things like that. So
Okay.
And you get slightly more. I mean, it's an interesting sphere in terms of some of at the moment culturally. Like, yeah, there's people like Russell Brand, who said he just had kind of a conversion moment. Talks about what Joe Rogan on a journey. You have voices like Jordan Peterson in and around that. You have she was a very famous atheist, Herschel Ali.
Yeah.
I can't remember her first name. And you'll always get kind of within the sports field, lots of people within that. I mean, it's probably worth a whole conversation in and of itself to look at.
It is, yeah. How do we investigate these things with a bit of skepticism and generosity?
And it's really interesting seeing people become Christian. So my main conversion moment was at 20.
Okay.
If all of my early years as a Christian, pre and post, were on film and on camera, and at every moment I was asked my opinion to the internet of everyone watching.
It'd be great.
Like, oh Lord, have mercy of the ideas that I had at that time.
I'd be really curious as well to maybe dive into or talk about. Obviously, this is sidetracking from Genesis slightly, but I think for a lot of people, those individuals that you mentioned who've been having this big sort of crisis of faith and coming to Christ, they're quite controversial figures, I think, for a lot of people. And I know that having even sat in conversations with other Christians, there's a degree of people getting angry at those people coming to faith because they think it gives Christians a bad name, which is fascinating to talk about. Because
sometimes you don't believe that someone is coming to faith.
Yeah.
You'd look at, so you mentioned Russell Brand.
Yeah.
He might have been a Christian and he might not. And his behaviour has been all over the media. So people, I think, are really wary. And it is really hard for us with anyone in the media or who we actually know to be generous without just saying, oh, if he's one of us, then that is lovely,
Yes, and
so
it's interesting in the sense of these people come to us through a medium. Do you know what I mean? They're not sat in the room. We don't have them around for tea. We don't know them, see them. For a lot of them, we are told about what they've said through someone else's view of that, and it becomes very difficult. But I mean, bring that back to that makes that question really highlight one of the areas around what it means to be supporting children at the moment in terms of who they have access to and their perception of people that they're looking to and are interested in, and therefore but they're not getting their idols so much, or their inspiration for their life are no longer as much in the family unit or in the immediate community or historic. Do you know what I mean? Beforehand, people's influences, you'd have saints by and large, but now it's like online, internet influencers, TikTok, whatever it is. So it's interesting. You go, that's who they want you to kind of talk about, and
because I think it's difficult as well, because in a world where a lot of these children look to influencers, and I think even arguably I'd say less so celebrities nowadays and more like YouTubers and that kind of thing, the spheres of content that you consume as a child has changed a lot from when we were younger. The kinds of stories that are being shown, the kind of personalities and what they talk about has changed. Some of those personalities will have quite overtly non-Christian viewpoints and will actively ridicule Christian viewpoints and Christians. And so when you're talking about influencers through the lens of like, hey kids, there are people who who are Christians, and it's not that you just magically become a bigot suddenly the second that you're a Christian, it's really interesting having that dialogue begin to open with a child, because I think they just come into it with a more natural wall up against it than they might have done previously. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't there for all the younger ones, but at least when I was younger, I think I could think of lots of still positive examples of Christians around me. I think that window has kind of shrunk over time. That's quite challenging, I think, for kids.
Well, let's go from some mixed idols to some thoroughly bad ones. Who are meeting in Genesis? Because I imagine they're not actually all stand-up characters.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So obviously the second session we have is on Adam and Eve, and now we don't. Yeah, absolutely. Hicks especially. We don't necessarily talk specifically about the fall in that second session. The second session is more about being made in God's image and what that means. But
that's loads to unpack. So we can
circle back to that part.
It's okay.
But the third session is more focused on the fall. So in that one, you're getting to approach the facts. I think some people, especially children, can sometimes take away bits from the story that maybe you and I don't think of first. Uh-huh. So when you're telling the story of Adam and Eve, you've got Eve obviously taking the apple, biting it after the conversation with the serpent. And if you're teaching that to a child I hate claiming that children's work is like simplified ministry. It's not. We're reading the same Bible, and as long as you're not taking away the Bible from that teaching, then you should get the same message each time, because you should be reading the same passages. But I think one of the pitfalls you can run into is you can simplify the story too much and you lose nuances. Like, what is it that the snake is specifically tempting Eve and Adam with? It's doubting God. It's going, you will not surely die.
Or did he really say?
Yeah, did he really say you will not surely die? And then adding into that, it's about God not wanting you to be like him, right? To eat of that knowledge of good and evil, you'll become more like him.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I think losing that context is something that you never want to take away from a child. But also, I think, especially in an age where people can jump to the Bible being sexist or going, like it's all Eve's fault that sin entered the world.
Yes.
I think it's also very important to mention the fact that Adam is also still there and not stopping Eve during all this, and then is also complicit in the act of doing it. So making sure to point that out too, I think very clearly in the story is quite important, because it is mankind as a unit is sinning and rebelling against God and choosing to trust themselves over that.
Yeah, it's pretty clear in how God responds with that kind of threefold curse. That no one's come out of that well at all.
No.
Everyone has disbelieved, turned away from God.
But it's important as well within that session too, that I include hope. So while, God does curse, even in the curse he gives to the serpent, right? There's explicitly a section about there's the promise of, you will bite his heel, he'll crush your skull, right? You get a promise of redemption, of the serpent being defeated, and the victory for Christ essentially, and that redemption for man through God, and
through God, but through people as well. It's going to be one of the children,
a descendant. Yes,
but that's really exciting. It is a little glimmer of Jesus really early on.
Yeah, and I think for a session like that, because obviously talking about sin is quite a heavy topic for a lot of people, still is for adults as well.
Which is sort of right.
Which is good, it's good to have that.
But it's a hard job.
I think you need to also accompany that with a message of hope too within it, because if my purpose was, I'm going to teach them about sin because I want them to feel bad and turn to God.
Yes.
The Bible will make you feel like that the second you read any, consequences of sin, but you also need to recognise that God has a rescue plan, that he dearly loves his children, that we were not made to be this imperfect, rebellious creature. It was our rebellion that turned against God.
This is like we talked about Romans, and it starts with this really bleak, dark beginning, but it's so that the light can shine much brighter.
Absolutely.
The firemen would be rubbish if you never had fires.
Yeah.
So you have to say this bad thing happens, and this rescue is awesome.
And it's interesting, so obviously in your plan, you've started with, it's not crazy, but you've started with Genesis 1 and 2. Genesis 1 and 2 become for Genesis 3, in the sense that it is easy for Christians, and sometimes we can have that opinion, or people can have that opinion of us, that we like, first and foremost, we jump in with the fall and our brokenness and our sinfulness and our fault. We go like what what's sometimes referred to as original sin, rather than actually going before that. There's original blessing. There's original beauty. Yeah. And to be able to do that with children at such a young age, to be able to try and install in them. And obviously, I think about this a lot in terms of with my girls.
Yeah.
How do I create the stability of them to see their original beauty and their original God love that is born in that before you go anywhere else? Because otherwise you then just end up with a very shaky ground of your whole identity is established on brokenness.
Guilt. Like there's, I think for some people, a feeling that it can be viewed as that Christianity is just there to make you feel bad about yourself.
Yes.
And if you don't give the hope aspect of that, then I can kind of see why you would think that. But it's not that feeling guilty about doing wrong is something that we're trying to like downtrod people and make them feel awful about them being themselves kind of thing. It's more about going, actually, no, it's a good thing to not want to be bad, to not keep rebelling against God and suffer the consequences of doing so. Why shouldn't we want to improve? And actually, there is a lot of hope and joy in the fact that you have a God who loves you unconditionally, despite all of your flaws, rather than going that we should glorify our flaws as being like our identifier. Again, that second session is about being made in the image of God. Our primary identifier is about our relationship with God. That is our primary identifier, first and foremost. And I think if you miss that part and you miss hope, then you're kind of just left with feeling like, oh, Christianity is just about making me feel bad or guilty about not being God's perfect idea of what a person should be.
Thanks. What does it look like for someone who's in year 4 or 5 of primary school to think, I'm made in the image of God, I'm going to live that out this week?
Well, that's a very tricky question. What's a year 3 or 4
The thunder is just...
that was an ominous question. That was an ominous question. Well, sorry, so what does a child in years 3 and 4 come away with?
For them to think, all right, I've learned that I'm made in the image of God. Practically, what are they going to do now? How can they be that?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, the obvious answers is to go. It's about taking comfort in being God's creation first and foremost. In looking, I think, to some degree at what God has created in you, so I think for some kids there's a lot of struggle with things like mental health and view of the self and like jealousy of others and that kind of thing, right? When you're made in the image of God, I think you have to accept that God has made you and has made you to be something that is great, that is good, is very good, right? All the other parts of creation are shown to be good, and he says, oh, this is good.
And at house group last night, we were looking at the Passion for Life resources that are supposed to spur us on to be able to do mission well, and they started with Psalm 139, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and God has knitted you together in a secret place. This is not just for kids, this is like a huge truth for all of us to take to heart. It's great to give that to them at a young age, there's a God who's made you.
Year 3 and year 4 are quite a tricky age to like judge what they'll take away from it, because fundamentally what you're coming to them with is an identifier that they can be confident in, that they can be proud of, that will not lead them to that it's not going to be perverted or used in a bad way. Knowing that you are created by God, you're created by a perfect creator, right? So you are made perfectly, but our actions and our decisions and our hearts that turn against God are the imperfections, and that's the part that we need to fix and change, right? So if a child is going like, oh, well, I'm not... this feels reductionist, but I think it's one of the things that helped me when I was younger, and I think some children can take away from it, is if you've got a lot of negative self-thought and talk about yourself, to some degree, you are not loving what God has created, right? You're not appreciating the beauty that has been made within you, for all the talk, I know we haven't talked about evolution and that kind of thing and, all of that, but your body, the way that you have been made, is a miracle in itself. It is complex, it is brilliant, and the fact that we can love, that we can feel, that we can have a relationship with God first and foremost by combining those two things pointed towards God is something amazing. And I think it's something that's liberating for children, because it doesn't necessarily matter about, Brittany's got, nicer hair than me, or I wish I was skinnier.
Is this what you felt growing up?
Yeah, deeply. Brittany really made me feel bad, man. It's that focus can become actually, being God's child, God's creation is actually something that is wonderful, that I can take pride in, because that is a great thing to be.
For me, one of the really important things about being made in God's image is that obviously when you think about God, God is a eternal, never-ending being. You can't get to the end of God. You can't get to the far side. There's always more, as C.S. Lewis talks about when he was like, about stepping into Narnia. It's bigger on the inside. It just keeps going, which means when that comes to us being made in that similar way, that there is no ending to us. You can't I can't go, oh, I've got James, or these are all the characteristics of who James is, and I put it in there, and here's a little box, and it's contained. I think that can be so important for kids to go to wrestle with that, because we're somewhat in a society we're always trying to put a label onto someone, attach a form of identity, and you pick this up in the classic films, movies. Do you know what I mean? It's the you can tell some of the movies that I watched growing up, the kids' film of the quarterback of the football team wanted to be a musician, but he couldn't because the dad was like, "You're a football guy," and he's like, "But I want to sing," and you get
just American Billy Elliot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. But all those things like that, and that's kind of archetypal kind of picture of it in video form. But we do that all the time. We do that all the time in relationships. It's easy for parents to go, or for us to go, oh, that's that kid, or this is this kid, and they sit in these boxes and go, no, what it means to be made in the image of God, while some of those things might be true, it's only ever partially true. We always have to allow people to then be more to them, and our kids to have more to them, and not to hold on to. Because you mentioned mental health, this is part of what can cause mental health, is going, this is who I think I am.
I am the sporty kid, I am the popular kid.
And then another part of them is wanting to find expression, and that's that tension.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we probably want to pick up this conversation again a little bit and continue. I think we've got so much more that we need to talk about. But do we need to wrap up briefly on that?
We're going to pause here, so you can, if you're listening at home, you can wrap up there, or you can dive straight into the next episode. We're going to talk about who else we're meeting in Genesis, because we haven't got very far, because it's been so good already. I bet we'll come back onto parenting, because we're going to meet some weird families.
We've got some guests coming in.
You can guess which weird family is coming along. We'll see you soon. Thanks very much for listening. If you heard anything particularly strange or exciting, do send some questions in. We'd love to hear from you, and try and answer some things that you're thinking about too. In the meantime, bye.